So, as a country, as a culture, as a society, we have all come to terms with the fact that our lifespan, maybe when we were little, we thought, I wonder what it's going to be like to be as old as my grandparents. Does anyone remember that? Wow, my grandparents are so old and wrinkly and they have gray hair. I wonder what life is going to be like when I reach that age. Well, chances are, if you're living through this country right now, during the height of this pandemic, there's a good chance you're never going to see your hair go gray. But it's not because we're going to develop anti-aging technology that's going to be given to the proletariat. It's because you're going to fucking die when you're 40 years old of a brain tumor and a seizure and lung failure, liver failure, heart failure. But what am I talking about? Of course, I'm talking about COVID, of course. So here's a new study. And this is, small sample size. And, this is results from over the last, year and a half. So we can presume, based on what we know, that the virus is more transmissible, more pervasive, more deadly, more immunity evasive. So we can assume that the findings of this study are actually much worse. Or rather, not as bad, the findings of the study, that is, not as bad as what's going on right now, because the virus is much, much worse now than it was a year ago or 2 years ago. Autopsies show COVID-19 virus in brain and elsewhere in body. Before I get too far into this COVID segment, did you know that 95% of Americans don't eat vegetables or fruits? That might sound shocking, right? Google it. 95% of Americans, fiber. What is fiber? Fiber is found in fruits and vegetables. 95% of Americans don't eat fiber. And if they don't eat fiber, that means they don't eat fruit and they don't eat vegetables. But hey, I'm not here to just make fun of people for being toddlers and not knowing how to feed themselves. But I'm here to tell you, when you don't eat fiber, it fucks your body up. Why? Well, I'm here to explain it to you. Fiber is indigestible. You cannot actually gain any at all energy from it. Well, then why is it so important if you don't gain energy from it? Why is it so important? Well, because you might not have known this. If you went to school in the United States of America, they don't teach you any of this shit. That's why we have a country where 93% of Americans have metabolic syndrome, which is a cluster of symptoms that includes inflammation, liver fat accumulation, etc. But fiber is food for your microbiome. Now you might think, what is a microbiome? Imagine, let's talk about kings and queens, right? If a king refused to feed all of the peasants, what do you think would happen? Do you think the peasants would lay down and die? Some of them might. But some of the peasants are going to bum rush the king and charge into the castle and try to revolt. Because some of the peasants want to live. And living beings need food to live. And if you starve living beings, they might come for you. Your microbiome has trillions of bacteria, living beings, that live inside of your intestines. And fiber is their food. They eat fiber. We don't eat it. They do. But what happens if you don't eat fiber? Well, some of the bacteria will lay down and die. That's right. But some of that bacteria, they're going to find a way to eat. And you know what they're going to do? They're going to eat you. That's what happens. But not only are they going to eat you, they're also going to eat your food. So if you don't eat fiber and you eat, let's say, a nutritious meal with no fiber, if that even exists, but let's for the sake of argument, a calorie is a calorie, right? Are you watching your calories? Well, chances are, if you don't have fiber in your diet, whatever calorie information you're reading is made up garbage, because that bacteria is going to eat your food. The protein, you're going to get none of that. Well, I mean, percentage-wise, you'll get a little bit. Are you going to get any of the good carbohydrate? No. Are you going to get anything? Vitamins, minerals? They're going to steal all your shit. But then they're also going to eat you. And when bacteria start eating you, your body's not going to just pretend nothing's happening, right? And this is what causes inflammation. Inflammation is when bacteria starts eating you alive and your body's like, yo, what the fuck are you doing? Sends over the immune system to deal with that. Most Americans, about 93% of them, have some form of chronic inflammation. Inflammation reduces the effectiveness of your immune system. So, in a country before the coronavirus pandemic, 88% of Americans were metabolically unhealthy and also had chronic inflammation. Now the number is 93%. So congrats, we're going in the wrong direction. But before the coronavirus pandemic, 88% of Americans essentially just left the front door right open for COVID to come on in. And while our immune system is busy fighting itself off, fighting our own microbiome, having a civil war, COVID is capable of doing much more damage. So now, with all of that said, I'm going to look into this article. An analysis of tissue samples from the autopsies of 44 people who died with COVID-19 shows that SARS-CoV-2 virus spreads throughout the body, including into the brain, and that it lingered for 8 months. Scientists from the National Institutes of Health tested samples from autopsies that were performed from April 20 to March 21. Now again, the virus is more virulent, more immune evasive, stronger, and lasts longer. We know that. XBB.1.5 is the most deadly, pervasive version of this virus yet. So take this and imagine it's much worse now than it was back then. They conducted extensive sampling of the nervous system, including the brain, in 11 of the patients, RNA and viable virus in various organs. All of the patients died with COVID-19 and none were vaccinated. This is, of course, before the vaccine was widely available. The blood plasma of 38 patients tested positive for SARS-CoV-2. 3 tested negative and plasma was unavailable for the other 3. 30% of the patients were female, and the median age was 62.5 years. 27 patients, 61.4%, had 3 or more comorbidities. Now, I know a lot of people are going to dismiss this. Oh, they had comorbidities. 93% of Americans have metabolic syndrome. That's a comorbidity. So I love when people go out there and say, oh, only the fat people are dying. Well, there's a kind of fat that you don't see, and there's a kind of fat that you do see. And lo and behold, a lot of so-called thin people have really puffy organs, like their liver, for example. liver fat accumulation is rampant, but you can't see it because it's inside of you. Now, you can see someone with big chubby thighs, but I'd rather have big chubby thighs than my liver being engulfed in fat. Because when your liver is engulfed in fat, it causes your whole fucking body to suffer, and it leads to liver cancer, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and so on and so forth, which of course produce a lot of inflammation. So again, we live in a country where minimum 93% of our country has comorbidities. And so when we talk about autopsies being done on people with comorbidities, that's not a minority. That's not even really a majority. We need another word for this shit. 93%? Like, that's a super duper hyper majority. That's like almost everything. If you got a 93% on your finals, you'd be like, fuck yeah, bitch. That's a good fucking score. On a fucking exam. It's way up there. But when we talk about people in this country with comorbidities, pretty fucking scary. Now, I have a question. A lot of people, I know, they've been watching my show already. They already know this stuff. But have you heard anybody? Tony Fauci? Rochelle Walensky? Joe Biden? Anybody? Have you heard anybody in these leadership positions talk about food? Nah. Have you heard any other news program talk about food? No. Has it been on mainstream news? No. Do scientists that are doing these studies even talk about it? No. Why? We don't even talk about masking, that's why. Masking is the most obvious fucking solution in the world. Most Americans don't even give a shit. They don't give a fuck. They don't give a fuck. Masking at the grocery store for 20 minutes is too much for these people. So are they really going to change their diet? Let's keep going. Analysis showed that SARS-CoV-2, as expected, primarily infected and damaged airway and lung tissue. But the researchers also found viral RNA in 84 distinct body locations and bodily fluids. If the virus can get into your blood, then they can pretty much get anywhere. And in one case, they isolated viral RNA 230 days after a patient's symptoms began. And this is why repeat infection is so dangerous. Because to this day, we still don't know if you can fully recover from COVID. To this day, and this is just more evidence in the piles of evidence, we do not know if you can recover from COVID. It's possible. Who knows? Maybe we'll create a super vaccine that just destroys all kinds of coronaviruses just like that. Who knows? Or maybe we'll find out that if you just get a good sleep, just take a rest, take a couple months off, lay in bed all day, 5 years down the line, maybe you'll be good to go. We don't know that yet. There's no evidence to suggest that you can fully recover from COVID at this point. Now, you can feel good. You can feel fully recovered in the same way that people with cancer who have yet to be diagnosed can feel pretty good until they get searing heart pain or faint or start coughing up blood all of a sudden. You can have symptoms that are destroying your body without knowing about it. That's an unfortunate side effect of the human body not giving us great signals. Doesn't really know how to tell us about cancer. Doesn't really know how to tell us about all kinds of things. Right? So you can feel good, you can feel like you fully recovered, but really, we don't even know if it's possible to fully recover from COVID. So let's throw that out there. The researchers detected SARS-CoV-2 RNA and protein in the hypothalamus and cerebellum of one patient, and in the spinal cord and basal ganglia of 2 other patients. But they found little damage to brain tissue despite substantial viral burden. So, actually damaging your brain, now they did find damage to the brain, but think about how having chronic inflammation is going to affect something like your mood. You know, you ever get headaches, migraines? You ever meet someone that gets migraines all the time? Gets a lot of headaches? You ever meet people that, you know, they're just kind of annoying, you know? They're just like angry all the time. They're just, you know, they got a short temper. You know, people that are just, oh, got a brain fog, or my head's in the clouds. Chronic inflammation in your brain, it's going to fuck up your mood. It's going to fuck up your mood. No wonder Americans are so angry and shooting up schools all the time. These people that got chronic brain inflammation, they're fucked up in the head. They got to eat some broccoli and calm the fuck down. The investigators also isolated viable SARS-CoV-2 virus from diverse tissues in and outside the respiratory tract, including the brain, heart, lymph nodes, gastrointestinal tract, adrenal gland, and eye. They isolated virus from 25 of 55 specimens tested. The authors wrote, "We demonstrated viral replication in multiple non-respiratory sites during the first 2 weeks following symptom onset." They add, quote, "Our focus is on short post-mortem intervals, a comprehensive standardized approach to tissue collection, dissecting the brain before fixation, preserving tissue and RNA later, and flash freezing of fresh tissue to allow us to detect and quantify SARS-CoV-2 RNA levels with high sensitivity," blah, 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 blah. So basically, you know, they've done a lot of different things to ensure that they get an accurate snapshot of what's going on in people's bodies before they die as well. Possible ramifications for long COVID. Senior study author Daniel Chertow, MD, MPH, said in an NIH news release that prior to the work, quote, "The thinking in the field was the SARS-CoV-2 was predominantly a respiratory virus. Finding viral presence throughout the body and sharing these findings with colleagues a year ago helped scientists explore a relationship between widely infected bodily tissues and long COVID, or symptoms that persist for weeks or months after infection." Do you want to know why COVID is mostly a respiratory virus? It's basic physics. Imagine that there is a whirlpool. You're swimming in a whirlpool pool, or maybe you're in an ocean. Maybe you're like playing Pokemon Gold and Silver and you got those whirlpools going on. Right? A whirlpool is sucking you down in it. You're getting sucked in. Now imagine that, except instead of you getting trapped in the whirlpool, it's a bunch of viruses. They're getting sucked right in. That's called breathing, folks. When you breathe, you are sucking in the air around you. And where does it go? Your fucking lungs, motherfucker. So no wonder COVID is predominantly in the fucking respiratory system. That's the front door to your body for viruses. But if it can go from your lungs into your bloodstream, then it can go everywhere. Quote, "We're hoping to replicate the data on viral persistence and study the relationship with long COVID." Hewitt said, "Less than a year in, we have about 85 cases and we're working to expand these efforts." Now again, this is data from April 20, to March 21. That's a long time ago now. The virus has gotten stronger. People have gotten weaker. So you tell me what's going to happen. We already know it can fuck your whole body up, including your brain. And what happens when your brain is getting fucked up? Your mood suffers. No wonder we had so many mass shootings. That explains January 6th. Being a little facetious here. But once again, our country is falling the fuck apart at the seams. A lot of people say, stop talking about COVID. I get it. Do you? Do you? Because every time I think I understand the gravity of the threat, another week comes along, and so does another variant, and so does another study that blows my fucking mind. So needless to say, I'm going to be doing some grocery delivery for the next couple of months, so do your best, everybody. Do not get infected if you can help it. Wear the highest quality N95 mask you can. Buy them online. Whatever. Buy a box of 100. You'll need them. Consider protective goggles. Fuck. Consider a gas mask and an oxygen tank. Because we are getting fucked up, folks. We are getting fucked up. And let me just tell you, it is not in the good dick way. But hey, if you're planning on getting fucked in the good dick way, just think about this. If COVID can get in someone's bloodstream, hey, what is the good dick made of? There's a lot of blood in there. So I'm just throwing that out there, everybody. And for that, I'll end my COVID segment for today.